The scent of old paper and quiet ambition clung to Elena Morrison like a second skin. Here, in the hushed heart of the Chicago Museum, she was truly herself. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of sunlight that pierced the gloom of the archives, illuminating stacks of forgotten history. Her fingers, calloused from years of handling brittle documents, moved with practiced grace across the surface of an ancient clay tablet. Around her neck, a thin chain held her silver museum key, cool against her skin, a constant reminder of the trust placed in her, the access she had to these sacred spaces. Her current restitution project, the painstaking cataloguing of artifacts stolen from indigenous communities, demanded her full attention. It was meaningful work, a quiet fight for justice, and she poured herself into it, letting the past heal the present. But lately, even in this sanctuary, a faint tremor of unease had begun to ripple through her focus. A feeling, not the familiar ghosts of past harassment, which she'd fought so hard to bury, but something new, colder. A whisper of being watched, just at the periphery of her senses, like a shadow that vanished when she turned her head. She tried to tell herself it was stress, the pressure of the project, but the feeling persisted, an unwelcome chill in the warmth of her quiet world. Tonight, the quiet was an impossible luxury. She stood in the grand foyer of the River North Gallery, the air thick with the murmur of 100 conversations, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the too bright glint of diamonds. Her museum's new exhibit was the centerpiece of this high-profile gala, and attendance was mandatory. Elena felt like a misplaced comma in a paragraph of exclamation points. Her simple black dress, her sensible heels, they were swallowed by the opulence, the predatory elegance of Chicago's elite. She nursed a glass of sparkling water, trying to melt into the marble pillars, to become invisible. But invisibility was not an option. She needed air, a moment of silence. Slipping away from the main crowd, past a display of Gilded Age portraits, she found a small alcove near what looked like a service entrance. A breath, just one deep breath. Her eyes scanned the room, a habit born of caution, a reflex that had saved her more than once, and then she saw him, a man, tall, dark, utterly out of place, yet perfectly blended. His gaze was fixed on her, unwavering. The same face she'd glimpsed near the museum gates, in the reflection of a coffee shop window, in the rear-view mirror of her own car. It wasn't stress. It wasn't her imagination. He was here, her stalker. A cold, visceral panic seized her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat demanding escape. Her breath hitched. She couldn't scream, couldn't make a scene. Not here, not again. Her eyes darted, desperate. A heavy, dark wood door stood slightly ajar, just beyond the alcove. A coat closet. It had to be. Without thinking, driven by pure instinct, she moved. A blur of movement, she hoped, an unnoticed ripple in the sea of mingling guests. She pushed the door open further, slipped inside and pulled it shut behind her, the heavy wood muffling the gala's cacophony. Darkness. Absolute suffocating darkness. The air grew instantly heavy with the scent of expensive wool, leather and something else, a faint, spicy cologne. She pressed herself against the wall, knees weak, hands trembling. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She squeezed her eyes shut, wishing she could disappear entirely, cease to exist. All she knew was that she had to hide, and she had. For now, the darkness was a suffocating blanket. Elena pressed her palms flat against the cold, unyielding wall of the closet, every nerve ending screaming. The scent of expensive cologne, sharp and undeniably masculine, filled her lungs, mingling with the heavy, dusty aroma of wool and leather. Her heart thumped a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a wild bird trapped in a cage. She could still see his face. The stalker's unwavering gaze burned into her vision. Was he outside? Had he seen her? Then a sliver of light pierced the absolute black. The heavy door groaned, not opening fully, but just enough to cast a long, imposing shadow across her hiding spot. She froze, breath catching in her throat, every muscle tensing. This wasn't the soft, hesitant light of a curious guest. This was deliberate. A figure filled the opening, silhouetted against the distant glow of the gala. He was impossibly tall, broad-shouldered, radiating an aura of calm, predatory power that made the air itself seem to crackle. He wasn't her stalker. This man was something else entirely, something far more dangerous, far more dominant. Over one arm, draped with a casual grace that belied its weight, hung a charcoal wool overcoat, dark as midnight, the fabric looking impossibly rich even in the dim light. His gaze, when it found her huddled against the wall, was unnervingly direct. There was no surprise in his eyes, no flicker of curiosity, only a cool, assessing intelligence that stripped away her defenses. He saw her, truly saw her. Her trembling hands, the wild fear in her eyes, the desperate attempt to disappear. He stepped inside, pushing the door shut with a soft click that echoed like a gunshot in the sudden silence. The faint light from the crack under the door was all that remained. Now they were truly alone in the dark. "Hiding, little bird?" His voice was a low rumble, dangerous and smooth, like polished steel. It wasn't a question, but a statement, an assertion of his absolute awareness. He didn't sound angry or even curious. He sounded in control. Elena couldn't speak. Her throat was a dry, constricted knot. She was trapped, cornered by a man whose presence alone was more intimidating than any threat she'd ever faced. His scent, that sharp, spicy cologne, was suddenly overwhelming, filling her senses, pinning her in place. She felt utterly disarmed, her carefully constructed composure shattered. He took a step closer, the darkness making him a shifting, imposing presence. She could feel the heat radiating from him, a silent, powerful force. "You're not making a sound," he observed, his voice still low, almost conversational, yet laced with an undeniable edge. "Smart, but not smart enough to stay out of trouble." Her mind raced, a frantic scramble for an explanation, an escape. But what could she say? "I'm hiding from a stalker who appeared at a gala, and I ducked into your closet." It sounded insane, pathetic. She just stood there, paralyzed, watching him, trying to discern his intentions. He wasn't the man who had haunted her periphery, but he felt like a much bigger, much more immediate threat. A slow smile, devoid of warmth, touched his lips, a subtle shift in the shadows. He knew her fear. He savored it, she realized with a jolt of terror. But then, an unexpected shift. His gaze softened, just a fraction, lingering on her pale face. He wasn't her stalker, but he knew danger. He understood it. He embodied it. "You're caught in something, aren't you?" he murmured, his voice dropping even lower, now almost a conspiratorial whisper. He didn't wait for her answer. His eyes, dark and fathomless, seemed to pierce through her, seeing the invisible threads of threat that had led her to his closet. Then came the chilling offer, spoken with the calm certainty of a man who held the world in his palm. "You're safer with me." The words hung in the air, a strange paradox. Safer? With him? The thought was absurd, terrifying. This man, a predator in human form, was offering her refuge. Yet in that instant a strange, undeniable truth settled over her. The immediate, suffocating panic caused by her stalker began to recede, replaced by a different kind of fear, yes, but also a bizarre sense of shield. A formidable, dangerous shield. She was caught between two threats, and this man, Roman O'Connor, was offering to be the greater, more controlled one. The line between danger and protection blurred, becoming indistinguishable in the suffocating dark. His words, "You're safer with me," were a cold, undeniable truth in the suffocating dark of the closet. Elena's mind screamed in protest, but her body, still thrumming with the terror of her stalker, felt a strange, desperate pull toward his formidable presence. Roman O'Connor didn't wait for an answer. He simply opened the door, a silent command in the gesture, and she found herself following, a puppet on invisible strings. The gala, with its glittering, oblivious crowd, seemed 1,000,000 miles away. He led her through a service exit, past startled staff, and into the biting Chicago winter air. A sleek black car, waiting as if conjured from the shadows, pulled up instantly. She slid into the plush leather interior, her eyes darting to the tinted windows, the world outside a blur. Roman settled beside her, his presence a heavy weight, filling the confined space with his scent, his quiet power. He didn't speak, didn't look at her, merely stared ahead as the city lights streaked past. She felt like a package, securely delivered, but to what destination? The car pulled up to a towering glass edifice in the South Loop, a beacon of stark modernity against the night sky. Up they went, in a private elevator that whisked them away from the city's hum, a silent ascent into his domain. The doors opened directly into a penthouse that stole her breath. Walls of glass offered a dizzying panorama of Chicago, a glittering tapestry of light and frost that seemed to stretch into infinity. It was opulent, vast, a testament to unimaginable wealth and power. It was also a gilded cage. Your apartment is no longer safe. Roman's voice cut through the silence, flat and definitive, as he gestured to a door off the main living area. This will be your suite. Elena felt a surge of defiance, a spark of the principled archivist fighting against the fear. My apartment is perfectly safe, and I'm going home. Her voice, though shaky, held a steel she hadn't known she possessed. He finally looked at her, his dark eyes like chips of obsidian. No, you're not. There was no room for argument, no negotiation. You're a civilian caught in something far beyond your understanding. Until it's handled, you stay here. She stepped into the suite he indicated. It was lavish, decorated with an understated elegance that screamed expense. A king-sized bed, soft lighting, a marble bathroom larger than her entire kitchen. But the implicit rules were clear, suffocating. There would be no unsupervised departures. She saw a sleek new phone on the bedside table. All communications will be monitored, he stated, confirming her fear. Any attempts to contact the outside without my knowledge will result in immediate consequences. Her anger flared, hot and sharp. Consequences? Are you holding me prisoner? She demanded, her voice rising. What gives you the right? Who are you? Roman's expression remained unreadable. A man who cleans up messes. And right now, you're a mess that needs containing. He offered no specifics, no details about the danger, only the chilling certainty that it existed and that she was inextricably linked to it. He provided every comfort, every luxury, yet every gesture underscored the vast, terrifying disparity between her quiet life among dusty archives and his world of absolute, unquestioned power. For the next few days, Elena chafed under the invisible restraints. She stalked the perimeter of her luxurious suite, gazing out at the city that felt so close, yet utterly out of reach. She resisted, demanding answers, asserting her independence, her principles. But Roman was a wall of calm authority. He would listen, his eyes never leaving her, then repeat his unwavering stance. Despite her frustration, an unwilling fascination began to bloom. She watched him from a distance, during the rare times he was in the main penthouse. She saw the subtle deference of his staff, the silent efficiency with which they moved, anticipating his every need. His operation was a well-oiled machine, cold and precise. He was a conductor, and everyone else, even her, was an instrument in his orchestra. He, in turn, seemed to study her. Her sharp questions, her unwavering integrity, her refusal to be cowed despite her obvious fear. It was a stark contrast to the people he usually encountered. She was a puzzle, a wild rose in his concrete garden, and Roman O'Connor, the city's most dangerous protector, seemed intrigued by the challenge of taming her. Or perhaps of simply keeping her safe, even if it meant clipping her wings. The forced proximity was a crucible, burning away Elena's defenses day by agonizing day. Roman O'Connor's penthouse, for all its breathtaking views and lavish comforts, felt less like a sanctuary and more like a high-tech interrogation room. Every interaction, every shared meal across the vast, polished dining table was a subtle battle of wills, a test of endurance. She felt constantly under his magnifying glass, his dark eyes missing nothing, dissecting her every twitch, every guarded word. "Your restitution project," he stated one evening, cutting through the polite silence of dinner. He didn't look at her, but she knew his attention was entirely hers, returning artifacts to indigenous communities. "It's admirable." Elena stiffened, a flash of pride mingling with irritation. "It's important work. More than that, it's about righting wrongs." She bristled at his casual assessment, at the implication that he could categorize her life's passion with a single, dismissive word. He finally met her gaze, a flicker of something unreadable in his depths. "And your previous troubles?" He paused, letting the unspoken accusation hang in the air. The harassment. That was a different kind of wrong. Her breath hitched. He knew. Of course, he knew. He was Roman O'Connor. He knew everything. A wave of shame and old fear washed over her, quickly followed by anger. "That's private," she snapped, her voice sharper than she intended. "It has nothing to do with this." "Everything has to do with this, Elena," he countered, his voice low, almost a purr. "You attract trouble. Or perhaps trouble finds you because you're too principled, too righteous for a world that doesn't care for either." "And you do?" she challenged, pushing her plate away. "You're the arbiter of what's right, keeping me here against my will, monitoring my calls, dictating my movements. Is that your version of justice?" Her frustration, bottled for days, finally spilled over. "What gives you the right to decide my safety means caging me?" He leaned back, a subtle shift in his posture that radiated coiled power. "My right. I have the right of capability, of necessity." His eyes narrowed slightly. "I don't traffic people. I don't spill civilian blood. Debts are paid. These are my rules, my city, my order." He spoke of his code, not with pride, but with a stark, brutal honesty that chilled her to the bone. It wasn't a moral code in the traditional sense, but a framework for absolute control, for maintaining a dangerous balance in a world she couldn't even begin to comprehend. Yet, despite the chilling implications, a strange, uncomfortable part of her resonated with it. No trafficking, no blood on civilians. It was a harsh, twisted morality, but it was a morality nonetheless, a shield against ultimate chaos. He was a monster, perhaps, but a monster with a terrifyingly clear set of boundaries. The forced proximity, the constant, intense dialogue began to fray the edges of her resistance in unexpected ways. Her fear of him remained, a constant hum beneath her skin, but it was now laced with an undeniable, dangerous curiosity. She found herself watching him, not just with apprehension, but with a strange, burgeoning fascination. Late one evening, she found him in the vast living room, staring out at the cityscape. The frost on the river below glittered under the moonlight, a silver ribbon against the dark urban sprawl. He seemed lost in thought, his usual impenetrable mask momentarily lowered. She approached, drawn by an invisible thread. "It's beautiful," she murmured, gesturing to the view. He didn't turn, but she felt his awareness of her. Cold. he corrected, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it, but clear. Their eyes met in the reflection of the glass, a shared glance that held an unexpected depth. For a fleeting moment, the roles of captor and captive blurred, replaced by two solitary figures observing a vast, indifferent world. The air between them crackled, thick with unspoken tension, a simmering awareness that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the dangerous, undeniable pull that was starting to take root deep in her chest. She hated it. She couldn't deny it. The line between protector and captor, between safety and surrender, was becoming impossibly, terrifyingly thin. Elena couldn't endure the gilded cage any longer. Her restitution project, the very core of her identity, called to her from the museum archives. It was a lifeline, a purpose beyond Roman's suffocating control. She cornered him one morning in his vast, sterile office, the city spread out beneath them like a silent, indifferent tableau. "I need to go to the museum," she stated, her voice firm, despite the tremor in her hands. "My project is vital. There are deadlines, approvals. It can't wait." She knew it was a gamble, an assertion of independence he might crush without a second thought. Roman slowly lowered the tablet he was holding, his dark gaze unblinking. He didn't immediately dismiss her, a small victory in itself. "Vital," he repeated, the word tasting strange on his tongue. "You believe this work is more important than your safety?" "It's important to me," she shot back, a spark of defiance lighting her eyes. "It's what I do. It's who I am. Keeping me locked away here, away from it's a different kind of danger." She hated the pleading note in her voice, but she had to try. She saw the wheels turning in his mind, assessing, calculating. He wasn't looking at her as a problem to be contained anymore, but perhaps as a variable to be understood. A beat of silence stretched, thick with unspoken power. Finally, he gave a curt nod. "Fine. Limited access, supervised every second, and you will follow every instruction without question." His eyes drilled into hers, a silent warning. "This is not freedom, Elena. This is a test, and a way for me to gauge the lingering threats." The terms were harsh, but it was a crack in the wall, a flicker of light. She agreed, knowing full well she was stepping onto a minefield. The trip to the museum was an exercise in surrealism. Two of Roman's men, silent, imposing shadows, flanked her at all times. The sleek black car, the tinted windows, the hushed vigilance. It was a stark contrast to her usual bus ride, her quiet walks through the sunlit streets. The museum, her sanctuary, now felt like a stage for a dangerous play. She moved through the familiar archives, her fingers tracing the spines of books, the edges of ancient maps. The scent of old paper was a comfort, but it couldn't erase the metallic tang of fear that clung to her. Every rustle of a page, every distant echo made her jump. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm, a constant drumbeat of unease. Then it happened. They were leaving, the men guiding her swiftly towards the waiting car. As they paused briefly at the entrance, her gaze snagged on a reflection in the polished marble floor. A car, a dark sedan, parked across the street, its engine idling. It was nothing remarkable, just another Chicago vehicle. But then, a fleeting image in its rearview mirror, a face, a man's face, sharp, intense, looking directly at her. It was gone in an instant, a ghost in the glass, but the chill it sent down her spine was bone deep. It wasn't the exact face of her original stalker, but the same predatory intensity, the same knowing gaze, a fixer, a different one, or perhaps the same one, simply now more brazen. Her breath hitched. She felt a sudden crushing weight, the air knocked from her lungs. It wasn't just stress, it wasn't her imagination. The threat was real. It was outside. It was waiting. One of Roman's men, sensing her sudden rigidity, placed a hand on her back, a silent, authoritative push. "Move, Miss Morrison." Back in the car, Roman's voice came through the secure earpiece one of the men wore, cold and efficient. "The sedan. Did you get the plates?" "Affirmative, boss." Sweeping the area now. Elena felt a tremor run through her. Roman had seen it too, or his men had. His protection, however suffocating, was undeniably necessary. The fleeting glimpse of that face, the sudden visceral fear it evoked, shattered any lingering illusions of her independent safety. Back in the penthouse, the silence was heavy. Elena stared out at the city, the frost on the river glinting like scattered diamonds. She still yearned for her freedom, for the simple, unburdened life she'd once known. But the undeniable reality of the threat, Roman's chillingly effective response, made her question everything. Could true safety ever exist without some form of sacrifice? The line between protector and captor, which had blurred so terrifyingly in the dark closet, now seemed to vanish entirely, replaced by a strange, dangerous acceptance. She was here, for now, and Roman O'Connor, the man who held her captive, was also the only reason she was still breathing. The air in the designated workroom of Roman's penthouse was sterile, a stark contrast to the comforting dust of the museum archives. Elena sat at a polished mahogany desk, surrounded by files and digital scans of her restitution project. Roman, a silent, imposing shadow, often occupied a chair by the window, ostensibly working on his own affairs, but his presence was a constant, low thrum of awareness, an unseen hand always on her. She hated the surveillance, but she craved the work, plunging into the meticulous details of historical documents as an escape. Roman had confirmed his intel about the man who'd pursued her at the gala. "Not a random creep, Elena," he'd stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "He's a fixer. Works for Alderman Thorne." The name meant nothing to Elena, but Roman's expression had tightened. "A powerful man, corrupt to the bone, and connected to my rivals." He hadn't elaborated, merely watched her for a reaction. Eleanor had felt a fresh wave of dread. Her initial stalker wasn't just a threat, he was a symptom of a much larger, more dangerous disease. Roman had seemed puzzled, though. Why would an alderman target a museum archivist? Days bled into a monotonous rhythm of work and watchful silence. Elena moved from cataloguing digital files to sifting through physical documents Roman's men had retrieved from her apartment. Files deemed safe enough to be brought into his fortress. She worked through a box labeled Morrison Project, 1920s Art Deco. It contained what she expected: old photographs, exhibition programs, acquisition records. She pulled out a thick, leather-bound volume, expecting a museum register, but it wasn't a museum register. It was heavier than it should have been, and its binding felt entirely wrong for the period. Her fingers, accustomed to the texture of history, immediately recognized the difference. It wasn't an artifact, it was something else. A flicker of crimson caught her eye. Tied around the volume, a bright red ribbon stood out against the dark leather, a stark, unsettling splash of color. Her heart gave a sickening lurch. This wasn't hers. This wasn't museum property. With trembling hands, Eleanor untied the ribbon. Inside, the pages were filled with columns of neat, tight script, dates, names, amounts, not museum acquisitions, but a chilling ledger of transactions, illegal transactions, shell corporations, coded references to properties and payoffs. The air grew cold. Her archivist's mind, trained to connect disparate facts, pieced it together with terrifying speed. The Stalker, the Gala, Roman's cryptic warnings, Alderman Thorne. It clicked into place with a horrifying inevitability. This wasn't about her past harassment. This wasn't about the museum. This was about this ledger. The harassment was a pretext, a cover. The fixer hadn't been after her. He'd been after what she unknowingly possessed. She had the ledger. She was no longer just a protected civilian, an unfortunate bystander. She was a critical, knowledgeable target, an active, unwitting player in Roman's dangerous game. The realization hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath. She wasn't just safe with him, she was safe because of him, and now, more than ever, she was bound to him. Roman, who had been staring out at the city, turned, sensing the shift in the room. His gaze fell on the open ledger in her hands, the red ribbon lying discarded beside it. His eyes narrowed, a slow, dangerous understanding dawning in their depths. "What is that, Elena?" His voice was low, laced with an unnerving calm that belied the tension suddenly coiling in the room. She pushed the ledger across the desk towards him, her hands still trembling. This isn't from the museum. It was in one of my boxes, misplaced or put there." Her voice was barely a whisper. "It's a ledger, an illegal one." He picked it up, his fingers brushing the red ribbon. He didn't need to read beyond the first few lines. His face, usually unreadable, hardened into a mask of grim fury. "Thorn," he growled, the name a low, dangerous curse. "This is his. This is everything." He looked at her then, his gaze piercing. "This ledger ties Thorn directly to my rivals, to illicit deals, siphoning funds, controlling city contracts. This could unravel everything. Alliances, power structures." His voice was cold, lethal. "You were never just a civilian, Elena. You were holding a bomb." The weight of his words settled over her, heavy and suffocating. She was no longer just running from a stalker. She was caught in the crosshairs of Chicago's underworld, a pawn in a game of power and corruption, and the only man who could protect her was the city's most dangerous player. Her blood ran cold. The price of her safety had just escalated beyond anything she could have imagined. The weight of Roman's words, "You were holding a bomb," pressed down on Elena, suffocating her. Her blood ran cold, fear a chilling current through her veins. She wasn't just a target. She was the fuse. The ledger, innocent with its red ribbon, now felt like a live wire in the center of the desk, humming with unseen power. She looked at Roman, his face a grim mask, and understood. Her quiet life was irrevocably shattered. There was no going back. The next hours were a blur of heightened tension. Roman became a different man, his movements sharper, his commands clipped and urgent into a secure comms device. The penthouse, already a fortress, seemed to tighten its invisible grip. She felt it in the subtle shift of the air, the increased vigilance of the men patrolling the corridors, the way Roman's gaze now lingered on the panoramic windows, searching the vast cityscape for unseen threats. His network, an invisible web stretching across Chicago, hummed with activity. He didn't need to tell her. She felt the tightening noose of the alderman's forces closing in, the fixer now desperate. Roman paced, a restless predator. He wasn't just protecting a civilian anymore. He was protecting a critical piece of leverage, a liability that could tear open a delicate power balance in his world. He looked at her, then at the ledger, a flicker of raw conflict in his dark eyes. His code, "No blood on civilians," was being tested, twisted by the sheer audacity of Thorn's reach and Elena's accidental entanglement. She saw the calculation there, the grim assessment of how far he was willing to go, what lines he might have to cross to keep her safe, to keep this safe. It was terrifying and strangely, profoundly reassuring. He wouldn't let her fall. Elena, however, refused to be a passive pawn. The initial shock gave way to a fierce, stubborn resolve. She had unwittingly walked into this war, but she wouldn't just sit and wait for the outcome. Her archivist's mind, which thrived on patterns and details, buzzed with an unexpected energy. "Let me look at it," she said, her voice cutting through the tense silence. Roman paused, turning to her. The ledger, she clarified, gesturing. I can help, I can find things, that's what I do. He hesitated, his gaze scrutinizing her, weighing her words. He saw not just fear, but a flicker of defiance, a demand for agency. He saw her strength. Slowly he nodded, pushing the ledger back across the table. Don't touch the original. We'll get you a scan. Hours later, Elena was hunched over a digital copy of the ledger, her silver museum key, a forgotten comfort still around her neck. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, her eyes scanning lines of meticulous script, cross-referencing names, dates, and coded entries. The numbers, the properties, the shell corporations. It was a tangled web of corruption. She felt a grim satisfaction as she began to unravel the threads, recognizing patterns, uncovering anomalies. This was her language, her battlefield. Roman watched her, silently, from his usual spot by the window. He wasn't just intrigued, he was assessing. He saw her focus, her meticulousness, her ability to make sense of chaos. She wasn't just a problem anymore, she was a resource, an unexpected ally. A flicker of respect, raw and unacknowledged, began to form in his eyes. These dates, Eleanor murmured, pointing at the screen, a new energy in her voice. They're not random. They align with city council meeting schedules, key votes, and these coded references. They're not just locations. They're specific development projects, projects that were approved against public interest. She looked up at him, her eyes bright with discovery, no longer just fear. This isn't just about bribes, Roman. This is systematic. Thorne isn't just taking money. He's orchestrating a massive siphoning of public funds. And these projects, they benefit your rivals. Roman's gaze sharpened, a dangerous light igniting in his eyes. He stepped closer, looking at the screen, then back at Elena, a new understanding dawning. Her insights, delivered with the precision of an archivist, were invaluable. She had connected dots he hadn't seen or hadn't bothered to look for. In that moment, the lines shifted again. She was no longer just a burden, or even just an asset. She was a partner, however unwilling in the dangerous game. He still felt the burgeoning, complex attachment to her, a need to protect her that went beyond his code. But now it was tempered by a grudging, undeniable respect. He saw her internal struggle, the dangerous choices she now faced alongside him, and an unexpected, intense appreciation began to take root in the cold, hard ground of his world. Elena Morrison, the archivist, had just proved herself indispensable. The silence that followed Eleanor's discovery of the ledger had been heavy, crackling with unspoken danger. Roman had spent hours on hushed calls, his face a thundercloud. Then abruptly, he'd turned to her. "We're moving you," he stated, his voice devoid of negotiation. "Thorne's fixer knows you have it, or at least knows you had it. He'll hit this tower. We use you as bait." Elena's stomach plummeted. Bait. The word tasted like ash. "Bait," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You want me to be a target?" "A decoy," he corrected, though the distinction felt razor thin. "The ledger is secured. You won't have it, but they won't know that. They'll come for you, and we'll be ready for them." His dark eyes held hers, unwavering. "It's a tactical retreat, Elena, to draw them out. You hate being a pawn, I know, but for now you are." She hated it. Every fiber of her being screamed in protest. But the cold logic of it, the undeniable necessity, settled over her with a sickening weight. She knew the danger was real. She knew Roman's world operated on these brutal principles. She swallowed, a bitter taste in her mouth, and nodded. The new safe house was a stark contrast to the opulent penthouse. No soaring glass walls, no sprawling city views. It was a nondescript apartment in a quiet, anonymous building on the edge of the loop. Smaller, plainer, furnished with utilitarian efficiency. The windows were reinforced, the door heavy steel. No Roman O'Connor pacing in the next room, no subtle deference from silent staff. Just a single grim-faced guard at the door and the oppressive quiet of her own thoughts. She felt the isolation acutely. The gilded cage had been suffocating, but at least it had Roman's unsettling, powerful presence. Here she was truly alone, a ghost in a beige box. She paced, restless, the quiet amplifying the frantic beat of her own heart. She hated being a pawn, hated the vulnerability, the loss of control. Hours later, the silence was shattered by a low, urgent voice through a secure comms device left on a table. It was the guard, speaking to someone. Roman, she assumed. "They're on the move, boss. Multiple units. South Loop. Looks like a full sweep." Elena froze. They, Thorne's men. They were looking for her. The thought sent a jolt of pure terror through her. She pressed her ear closer to the device, straining to hear. Fragments of conversation drifted through, tense and clipped. Streets named, car models, directions, a chase, a real, live chase unfolding out there in the city, with her as the phantom prize. She imagined the dark sedans, the determined faces, the hunt, her stalker, the fixer, desperate to retrieve the ledger. She pictured Roman's men, a dangerous counterforce, leading them on a wild goose chase through the familiar streets of Chicago, past the river, the museums, the very places she loved. She was terrified, a knot of dread tightening in her chest, but also fiercely determined. She had to survive this. The separation, ironically, began to shift something within her. Without Roman's constant, overwhelming presence, she felt the void. The suffocating control had been a shield. His quiet power, which she had resented so fiercely, had been a barrier between her and the brutal reality of the world he inhabited. Now, with just the thin walls of the safe house between her and the chase, she understood. She missed the strange, undeniable safety he provided. Later that night, Roman's voice finally came through the device, steady and calm, cutting through the static. "They hit 3 of our known safe houses, and 2 of your old haunts. They're frustrated, desperate." "Did they find anything?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Only what we wanted them to find," he replied, a hint of grim satisfaction in his tone. "False leads, distractions. The ledger is secure, Elena. You're secure." "You knew they would do this," she whispered, the realization hitting her. "You planned this." "Every move, every counter-move," he confirmed. "This isn't just about protecting you, Elena. It's about leveraging their desperation, exposing their weaknesses. You're smart. You're strong. I knew you could endure the weight. I needed to draw them out, without you being in direct harm." His words, simple and direct, resonated with a chilling clarity. He hadn't just protected her, he had used her, but with a strategic brilliance that saved her. He saw her agency, even in her isolation, acknowledged her strength in facing this forced separation. For the first time, she understood the deeper layers of his strategic thinking, the intricate chess game he played. The lines blurred again, but this time, not between captor and protector, but between 2 minds capable of navigating a dangerous world. A grudging, undeniable trust solidified, cold and hard in her heart. She was a pawn, yes, but a pawn in the hands of a master strategist, and for now, that felt like the safest place to be. The forced separation had ended as abruptly as it began. Roman had appeared at the safe house, his presence filling the small apartment with an intensity Elena had almost forgotten. He hadn't explained, hadn't asked. He simply said, "It's time," and she had followed, a strange mix of relief and renewed apprehension settling in her chest. Back in the opulent penthouse, the air still crackled with danger, but now it was a shared, palpable thing. The ledger lay open on the vast dining table, its red ribbon a stark contrast to the dark leather. It was no longer just a threat, it was a puzzle, a weapon, a key. Roman stood opposite her, his expression grim. They were reunited, but the world outside was still a hungry beast, baying for the information locked within these pages. "Let's go through it," Elena said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The isolation had given her a new resolve. She wasn't just a target anymore. She was the one who had found the bomb, and she would help dismantle it. Her archivist's mind, honed by years of sifting through dusty truths, craved the methodical work. Roman nodded, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. He watched as she leaned over the ledger, her fingers hovering, reluctant to touch the physical evidence of so much corruption. Her gaze swept over the precise columns, the neat, tight script. Dates, names, amounts. She had seen similar structures in historical financial records, but never with such sinister intent. "These aren't just random payments," she murmured, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Look at the dates. They're clustered around city council meetings. Key votes." She pointed to a specific entry with a slender finger. "This one, for example, June 14th. There was a controversial zoning amendment passed that week for the Riverwalk extension. The public outcry was huge." Roman leaned closer, his dark head near hers, the faint scent of his cologne filling her senses. She tried to ignore the pull of his proximity, focusing on the intricate web unfolding before them. "And these," Elena continued, her voice gaining confidence, "these aren't just amounts. See the coded references. Phoenix Rising, Emerald Tower. These aren't just nicknames, they're projects. Specific development projects that benefited from those votes." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with discovery. "Alderman Thorne isn't just taking bribes. He's systematically siphoning public funds. He's manipulating the council to approve projects that enrich him and his associates." A cold, hard realization dawned on her. "And these projects, these associates, they're Roman's rivals, aren't they?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The silence that followed was her answer. Roman's jaw tightened. He didn't need to confirm it. Eleanor had connected the dots with chilling accuracy. She wasn't just looking at a criminal ledger. She was seeing the intricate power dynamics of his world, the invisible threads that tied corruption to territory, to influence, to his own precarious hold on order. "Exposing this," Elena pressed on, her initial fear replaced by a surge of furious clarity, "wouldn't just dismantle Thorne. It would unravel entire power structures. It would hit your rivals where it hurts them most, their wallets, their influence, their legitimacy." She felt a surge of defiant satisfaction. This wasn't just about her safety anymore. This was about justice, her own quiet brand of it, now thrust into the harsh light of his world. Roman straightened, his gaze fixed on her, no longer just assessing but truly seeing. The archivist, the quiet woman he had caged for her own protection, had just laid bare a crucial strategic advantage, a path to not just survival, but victory. His expression remained unreadable, but Elena felt the shift in his silent appraisal. He was impressed. More than impressed. He was seeing her as an indispensable part of this. "You have an eye for detail, Elena," he conceded, his voice low, a grudging acknowledgement, "a very useful eye." He gestured to the ledger, then to the various screens around the table. "Continue. Find everything. Every date, every project, every connection. You lead on the research. I'll handle the rest." It wasn't a request. It was a command, but it was also an acceptance, a strategic alliance forged in the crucible of danger. Elena felt a strange sense of empowerment. She was still in his world, still under his protection, but now she had a role. She had agency. The heavy weight of being a pawn began to lift, replaced by the formidable, terrifying responsibility of being a partner. Elena felt a strange, exhilarating rush as she and Roman pieced together the fragments of Thorne's corruption. The ledger was their blueprint, her insights the guiding hand. The alderman's vulnerability, they concluded, was the upcoming city council vote on a major infrastructure project, a project heavily tied to Roman's rivals, and one that, if exposed now, would shatter Thorne's carefully constructed empire. This was their window. This was where the fixer would need the ledger destroyed, beyond all doubt. "We expose him at the vote," Roman stated, his voice low and decisive, mapping out the strategy on a holographic display that shimmered with city maps and data. "The information is leaked to a contact at the press, anonymous, undeniable. Thorne goes down, his network crumbles." He looked at her, his gaze intense. "You stay here, safe, away from the fallout." Elena's heart lurched. Stay here? After everything, after her work, her insights, her newfound fragile agency, he wanted to relegate her back to the gilded cage. A surge of fierce anger, hot and unexpected, flared within her. "No," she said, the word sharp, cutting through the sterile air of the penthouse. Roman's head tilted, a subtle warning in the gesture. "Elena, this is my world, my rules. You've done your part. The rest is mine to handle." "My part?" she scoffed, pushing back from the table. "I found the ledger. I spent days unraveling his web, connecting the dots that you missed. My civilian status, my history. They make me credible in a way your contacts never will. If this is going public, I need to be part of it." Her voice rose, fueled by indignation and a desperate need to reclaim her own narrative. "My first-hand knowledge of these details, my understanding of how he manipulated the system. That's crucial. You want to expose a corrupt alderman, Roman. You need a face, a clean one." His eyes, dark as midnight, hardened. "You will not put yourself in harm's way, Elena. That is non-negotiable." His tone was firm, brooking no argument. He saw her as fragile, as someone to be sheltered. She saw herself as a weapon. "You don't get to decide what's harm's way for me anymore," she shot back, her hands clenching into fists. "Not after you dragged me into this, not after you caged me, not after I stared down a chase for a ledger I didn't even know I had. I refuse to be a passive victim, Roman. I refuse to let you make me one again." The words spilled out, raw and unfiltered, tearing at the delicate fabric of their fragile trust. She was pushing, deliberately pushing, at every boundary he had set. Roman's jaw flexed. He looked away, turning to the vast window, staring out at the frozen cityscape, the frost on the river gleaming like shattered glass. Eleanor held her breath, waiting for the inevitable command, the dismissive wave of his hand. But it didn't come. He stood there, silent, his broad shoulders tense, a man grappling with a profound internal conflict. Finally he turned back, his gaze heavy, weary. "You misunderstand my code, Elena," he said, his voice surprisingly soft, though still laced with steel. "It's not just about protecting you. It's about maintaining a semblance of order in this city. Thorne's corruption isn't just an inconvenience. It's a cancer. It bleeds into everything, undermines the very fabric of what I endeavor to control. This isn't a petty squabble. This is a violation of the balance." He took a step towards her, his presence overwhelming. "I am not just a criminal, Elena. I'm a protector of a different kind, and this alderman's actions directly threaten the peace I enforce. You, with your principled outrage, you see the injustice. I see the destabilization. We have a common enemy, if not a common morality." He paused, then sighed, a sound that seemed ripped from deep within him. "Fine," he conceded, the word almost a growl. "You'll be involved, but on my terms. Every move choreographed, every word vetted. You will follow every instruction, without deviation. And if I say pull back, you pull back. No heroics, no grandstanding. Do you understand?" Elena felt a dizzying mix of triumph and terror. He had agreed. He was letting her lead in a way. But the parameters were clear, unforgiving. She was stepping directly into the heart of his dangerous world, with his code as her only shield. She swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. "I understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The line between being protected and being a participant had finally, terrifyingly, blurred into a single, dangerous path. The blueprint for their trap was laid out on the vast holographic display in Roman's penthouse, shimmering with schematics of the River North Gallery. Eleanor traced a finger along the projected walls, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. This wasn't just the gallery, it was the place. Where she'd run, where she'd hidden, where she'd first encountered the cold, thrilling danger of Roman O'Connor. Now they were returning, not as a panicked archivist and a looming shadow, but as strategists setting a deadly stage. "The message will be subtle," Roman explained, his voice low and precise, devoid of emotion. "A whisper planted in Thorne's network, indicating you're attempting to retrieve something crucial from the gallery storage, something you couldn't trust me to handle." Elena felt a twist of unease. "You want them to think I'm acting alone, that I'm vulnerable." "Exactly," he confirmed, his eyes locking onto hers, dark and unblinking. "The fixer wants the ledger. He'll believe you're desperate enough to risk everything to get it. He'll see an opportunity to corner you, to end this without my direct interference." Her heart hammered against her ribs. She was bait, a lamb among wolves, deliberately placed. She had agreed to this, demanded her agency, but the reality of it was a cold, hard slap. Yet a strange resolve settled over her. This was her fight now, too, her chance to reclaim control, not just for herself, but for the principle of it. For the next few hours, Roman's men moved with silent efficiency, preparing the gallery. Elena watched the operations from a secure feed, a chilling preview of her own impending confrontation. The gallery, usually bustling with art and light, was now a cavernous, empty space, stripped of its exhibits, awaiting its darker purpose. Later, Roman returned to the penthouse, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. He poured himself a glass of amber liquid, his back to her, the city lights reflecting in the glass walls. Elena waited, sensing a shift in the air, a new layer to the tension. "I received intel," he said, his voice quiet, almost contemplative. "About Thorne's fixer." Eleanor's breath hitched. She braced herself for details of his brutality, his ruthlessness. "His name is Marcus Bell," Roman continued, turning to face her. His gaze was heavy, assessing her reaction. "He's not just working for Thorne, he's indebted to him deeply." Eleanor frowned. "Indebted? Like financially?" Roman shook his head slowly. "Family. Thorne holds a significant debt over Bell's sister. A past indiscretion, a criminal charge Thorne made disappear. Bell's loyalty isn't to Thorne's corruption, but to his family's safety. He genuinely believes that destroying this ledger is the only way to save them from ruin." The revelation hit Eleanor with the force of a physical blow. Her carefully constructed image of the fixer, a faceless villain, shattered. He wasn't pure evil. He was a man cornered, driven by a desperate, twisted love for his family. A mirror, in a way, to Roman's own complicated code, his own fierce, if dangerous, protection of his chosen family, his city. It was a dark, profound irony. Her initial surge of fear was now laced with a strange, unsettling sympathy. This wasn't a monster. It was a desperate man, trapped in a web of obligations, just as she was, albeit by different means. It made the coming confrontation infinitely more complex, more human. Roman watched her, his expression unreadable. "He's a man who understands debt, Elena, and the lengths one goes to pay it, or to protect those it binds. I understand that." There was no judgment in his voice, only a cold, professional recognition of a specific kind of loyalty, a code he respected. even as he moved to dismantle it. Elena felt a tremor run through her. This wasn't a simple fight between good and evil. This was a clash of broken moralities, a dance of survival where even the antagonist was a victim of circumstance. It didn't lessen the danger, but it deepened its shadow, making the stakes heavier, more real. She was walking into a trap, yes, but now she understood the desperate heart of the man waiting for her. The gallery awaited, and with it a confrontation that would test not just her courage, but her understanding of the complex, dangerous world she had been thrust into. Elena traced the glowing lines of the River North Gallery's blueprints on Roman's holographic display. Her archivist's mind, usually dissecting ancient texts, now devoured floor plans, security camera angles, and emergency exits. She'd studied the gallery's layout for hours, remembering the subtle details from her gala visit, cross-referencing them with the schematics Roman provided. Every fire exit, every security panel, every blind spot, she mapped them in her head, a silent mental battlefield. Her silver museum key, cool against her skin beneath her simple black dress, felt like a talisman, a whisper of her own expertise in secure spaces. "The main power conduit runs beneath the west wing," she pointed out, her finger hovering over a specific section. "And the emergency shutters are tied to a central panel near the main entrance, accessible only with a security override code, or, in a blackout, with a manual release." Her voice was steady, surprising even herself. She was no warrior, but she understood systems, understood leverage. Roman, watching her with that unnerving intensity, simply nodded. His silence was a form of trust, a dangerous weight she felt acutely. His men were already in position, a silent net cast around the gallery, but Elena knew the initial confrontation, the spark, was hers. She was the lamb, but she carried a hidden blade of intellect. The ride to the gallery was tense, the black car, a silent cocoon hurtling through the city's cold embrace. Elena stared out at the passing streetlights, each one a stark reminder of the normal world she had left behind. Her heart hammered, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs, but beneath the fear was a strange, cold calm. This was it. The moment she'd demanded, the agency she'd fought for. As the car pulled up discreetly, blocks away, she felt a final surge of resolve. The gallery loomed, dark and silent, a sleeping beast waiting to be awakened. She stepped out into the biting winter air, Roman's men fading into the shadows around her, their presence a silent, formidable shield. She walked towards the staff entrance, her steps firm, a decoy ledger, thick and bound in dark leather with its telltale red ribbon, clutched in her hand. It was a fake, a clever replica, but the fixer wouldn't know that. She slipped inside, the heavy door closing with a soft thud behind her, plunging her into the cavernous silence of the empty gallery. The air was cold, smelling of fresh paint and anticipation. She moved to the center of the main hall, positioning herself under the vast, vaulted ceiling, a lone figure in a silent, predatory space. She took a deep breath, the scent of expensive polish filling her lungs. Roman was out there, monitoring, ready. But for this moment, she was utterly, terrifyingly alone. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Her senses were on high alert, every distant creak, every whisper of the wind against the glass, amplified. Then, the heavy clang of the main service entrance. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, echoed through the vast space. Not one man, several. Marcus Bell, Thorne's fixer, emerged from the shadows, flanked by two burly men. His face, lean and sharp, held a grim satisfaction. He believed he had her. He believed he had the upper hand. Elena remembered Roman's intel, the sister, the debt, the desperation. It didn't soften the fear, but it sharpened her focus. He was a man fighting for his family, just as Roman, in his own twisted way, fought for his chosen family, his city. It was a dangerous mirror. Belle's eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on the decoy ledger in her hand. A predatory smile, devoid of warmth, touched his lips. "Miss Morrison," he said, his voice a low sneer. "Going rogue, are we? Roman not protecting his little archivist anymore?" Elena felt the tremor in her hands, but she held her ground, her gaze unwavering. She was a lamb among wolves, but she carried a hidden blade of intellect, and she was ready to use it. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken threats, the tension palpable, a living thing in the vast empty gallery. She was ready. The silence in the River North Gallery was a living thing, stretched taut between Elena and Marcus Bell. The vast space, usually a sanctuary for art, now felt like a gladiatorial arena. Bell's men flanked him, hulking shadows in the dim light, their presence a palpable threat. Elena clutched the decoy ledger, its familiar weight a cold comfort in her trembling hands. She met Bell's sneer with a steady gaze she didn't entirely feel, refusing to let her fear show. "Going rogue, are we, Miss Morrison?" Bell repeated, his voice dripping with condescension. "Roman not protecting his little archivist anymore. Or did he finally realize you're more trouble than you're worth?" Elena's heart hammered, a frantic drum against her ribs. She could almost taste the metallic tang of fear in the air. But she remembered Roman's words, leverage their desperation. Bell thought he had her. He thought she was alone, unprotected. He thought she was weak. "Roman knows exactly where I am, Mr. Bell," she stated, her voice surprisingly firm, though a tremor ran through her. She lifted the decoy ledger slightly. "And he knows what I have, what I'm willing to do to expose Thorn." Bell's eyes narrowed, a flicker of genuine interest, quickly masked by disdain. "A brave little archivist. Think you can outsmart us, do you? Hand over the ledger, and maybe, just maybe, you walk away with all your fingers." He took a step forward, his men closing in, a tightening circle of menace. The air grew heavy, thick with unspoken threats. Elena held her breath, every nerve screaming. This was the moment, the plan. Her eyes darted discreetly to the subtle outline of the power conduit she'd memorized, the location of the emergency panel. She had to trust Roman, trust his timing, trust herself. Then, a sudden, jarring click. The gallery plunged into absolute darkness. One moment, the hushed space was dimly lit by emergency lights and ambient city glow. The next, it was swallowed whole. The blackness was immediate, suffocating, a physical blow that stole her breath. A collective gasp rippled through Bell's men, followed by shouts of confusion, curses echoing in the sudden void. Panic, raw and visceral, erupted. Elena's own heart leaped into her throat, her body tensed, every muscle coiling for flight. The familiar terror of being unseen, of being hunted in the dark, washed over her. But even as the primal fear tried to seize her, a cold, hard voice in her head cut through the chaos. "This is it, your move." She felt Bell's sudden disorientation, his men bumping into each other, their shouts less confident, more frantic. The darkness, which had initially been a weapon against her, was now her weapon, Roman's signal. Ignoring the pounding in her ears, Elena moved. Driven by pure instinct and memorized blueprints, she spun on her heel, her hand darting out, finding the cool, smooth surface of the wall. She didn't hesitate, didn't falter. She counted her steps, her fingers brushing against a framed exhibit plaque, then the rough texture of a stone pillar. She knew exactly where she was. "What the hell was that?" Bell roared, his voice closer than she expected, a burst of frantic energy. "Find her! Don't let her move!" But Elena was already a blur in the black. Her hand connected with the smooth metal surface of the emergency control panel, exactly where it should be. The panel was cold beneath her trembling fingers. She remembered Roman's instructions, the schematics. Manual release, top right lever. Her fingers fumbled for a second, the darkness absolute, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She found the lever, a small, cold piece of metal. Her thumb pressed down, her palm pushed forward, a surge of adrenaline giving her strength. A low, mechanical groan started, rumbling through the gallery, growing louder, more insistent. Rish! Clunk! The sound was deafening, echoing off the high ceilings. Heavy, steel emergency shutters, unseen in the black, began to descend over every window, every exit, every glass panel. The gallery, which had been open to the city, was now becoming a sealed vault. The initial confusion from Bell's men morphed into frantic shouts of alarm. Rish clunk, rish clunk. Metal grinding on metal, the shutters sealed off the main entrance, the service doors, even the skylights high above. The already limited emergency lighting was swallowed by the descending steel. The last slivers of outside world vanished, leaving them in near absolute blackness, punctuated only by the faint, eerie glow of red exit signs and the whirring of the final shutters locking into place. Trapped. They were all trapped. Bell's furious curses ripped through the air, laced with a new, terrifying edge of realization. "What did you do, you bitch?" he shrieked, no longer sneering but genuinely rattled. He was cornered. His men were scrambling, banging against the now impenetrable steel. Elena stood perfectly still, her chest heaving, listening to the cacophony. The mechanical groans faded, replaced by the shouts of frustrated men. She had done it. She had sealed them in. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was now mingled with an intoxicating rush of power. She had taken control. The lamb had just locked the wolves in the cage with her, and she was ready for the next move. The mechanical groans of the descending emergency shutters had faded, replaced by the chilling, echoing silence of the sealed gallery. Bell's furious curses still ripped through the air, but they were laced with a new, terrifying edge of panic. He was no longer sneering. He was a trapped animal. Elena stood perfectly still, her chest heaving, the raw adrenaline making her tremble. The fear was a cold knot in her stomach, but it was now mingled with an intoxicating, dangerous rush of power. She had done it. She had locked them all in. "What did you do, you bitch?" Bell shrieked, his voice frantic, bouncing off the high ceilings. His men were scrambling, banging against the now impenetrable steel, their shouts a chorus of alarm. Elena took a deep, shuddering breath. The dim red glow of the emergency exit signs cast long, distorted shadows, turning the once grand gallery into a claustrophobic maze. She could hear the heavy thud of Bell's frantic footsteps, closer now. He was coming for her. She lifted the decoy ledger, its dark leather binding almost invisible in the gloom. "I sealed us in, Mr. Bell," she stated, her voice surprisingly steady, though it felt thin and reedy in the vast space. "And you're not going anywhere until you hear my terms." Bell emerged from the deepest shadows, his face contorted in a mask of fury. He held a heavy-looking pistol, its metallic gleam catching the faint red light. "Terms? You think you're in a position to make demands, little archivist? You're alone. We have the numbers. Give me the ledger, or I'll gut you and find it myself." Eleanor felt a fresh wave of terror, her heart hammering against her ribs. The gun, solid and real, was pointed directly at her, but she held her ground, refusing to cower. She had to gamble. She had to show him she wasn't the terrified woman he expected. "This isn't the ledger you're looking for, Mr. Bell," she said, her voice dropping to a low, confident tone. With a deliberate, steady movement, she tossed the decoy ledger to the polished marble floor. It landed with a hollow thud, sliding away into the shadows. "It's a fake. A very good one, but still a fake." Bell's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock crossing his face. His men stopped scrambling, their confusion turning to stunned silence. He had been outmaneuvered. "The real ledger," Elena continued, pressing her advantage, her gaze unwavering, "is secured, far from here, and only Roman O'Connor knows its exact location. But I can tell him to release it, or more importantly, to not release it." She paused, letting the implications sink in, to the authorities, to the press, to everyone who would love to see Alderman Thorne and his entire network crumble before the council vote. Bell's jaw worked, his fury warring with a dawning realization. He was trapped, and she held the key. Elena remembered Roman's words about Bell's family, the debt. That was her leverage. "You're a desperate man, mister." "Bell," Elena said, pushing harder, her voice laced with a cold, clear logic. "You're doing this for your family, for your sister, to protect them from Thorne. But if you walk out of here without that ledger, Thorne will still ruin them. And if you kill me, Roman will ensure he ruins them 10 times over." She felt a vibration against her hip, the discreet pulse of the secure comms device Roman had insisted she wear, his signal, his reluctant agreement. He was letting her lead. The knowledge sent a surge of adrenaline through her, solidifying her resolve. "My terms are simple, Mr. Bell," she declared, her voice ringing with newfound authority in the silent gallery. "The real ledger, delivered safely in exchange for the names. Every name, every player in Thorne's corruption, especially those tied to that upcoming council vote. Not just for Roman, but for public accountability, for justice." Bell stood motionless, his gaze fixed on her, his face a battleground of rage and despair. He knew she had him. He knew the depths of Roman's reach, the certainty of his retribution. And he knew the ledger was his only chance to fulfill his own desperate, twisted code of honor. Finally, slowly, Marcus Bell lowered the gun. "The names," he rasped, his voice raw with defeat. "I'll give you the names, but you promise. You swear Roman will honor the swap, my family." "Roman O'Connor pays his debts, Mr. Bell," Eleanor stated, the words chillingly true. "And he honors his agreements. Give me the names, and the ledger will be delivered. Your family will be safe from Thorne." Bell nodded, a single bitter nod of concession. He began to speak, rattling off names, dates, coded locations. Elena repeated each one into her comms device, Roman's network recording every damning word. The weight of his confession, the sheer scale of the corruption, settled heavily on her. As the last name was uttered, a sudden, blinding flash of light exploded from the main entrance. The emergency shutters groaned, retracting with a deafening clunk, revealing Roman's men, sleek and efficient, flooding into the gallery. They moved with silent precision, disarming Bell's men, securing the fixer himself. Elena stood amidst the chaos, shaken but triumphant. Her breath hitched, a wave of exhaustion washing over her. She had faced him down, she had negotiated, she had taken control. Roman O'Connor emerged from the now open entrance, his dark eyes sweeping the scene, assessing before settling on her. There was no surprise, no praise, just a long, intense look that conveyed everything. She had led, and he had let her. She had emerged from the heart of danger, not unscathed, but undeniably victorious. The mechanical groans of the shutters had barely faded before the city's underbelly began to churn. Back in Roman's penthouse, the chaos of the gallery felt like a distant dream, replaced by a new, frantic energy. Elena, still trembling with residual adrenaline, watched Roman move. He was on the phone, his voice low and urgent, issuing commands, his gaze occasionally sweeping to her, a silent acknowledgement of her role. The names Bell had confessed, whispered into her comms device, had been relayed instantly. Within hours, the carefully orchestrated leak began. Eleanor watched the news channels on the penthouse's massive screen, a strange mix of triumph and disbelief warring within her. Anonymous sources, citing irrefutable evidence, the ledger, confirmed by Bell's testimony, had exposed Alderman Thorne. The scandal erupted like a wildfire, engulfing the city council, shattering Thorne's network, and pulverizing his rival's power before the critical vote could even take place. Roman's influence, she knew, had just solidified, subtly, invisibly, without a single direct criminal link to him. The immediate danger had passed. Thorn was broken. Bell was neutralized. Elena was no longer just protected. She had actively shaped the outcome, her intellect a sharp blade in a world of blunt force. The exhaustion that washed over her was profound, but beneath it thrummed a fierce, unyielding sense of agency. She had faced down a monster, and she had won. But the victory felt hollow if it meant simply returning to a gilded cage. Roman found her by the window, staring out at the city lights. He walked silently, his presence a familiar, powerful weight. He didn't offer praise, didn't comment on the news. He simply stood beside her, his gaze also on the sprawling urban landscape. "It's done," he said, his voice flat, definitive. "Thorn is finished. The threat is contained." Eleanor turned to him, her heart thumping, a new kind of fear, raw and intimate, seizing her. This wasn't about Thorn anymore. This was about them, about her. She had to speak now, before the momentum of her defiance faded. "It's not done, Roman," she stated, her voice trembling slightly but holding firm. "Not for me." He turned, his dark eyes meeting hers, a flicker of surprise in their depths. "What do you mean?" "I mean this." She gestured around the opulent penthouse, then to herself, to him. "This arrangement, it's over." His jaw tightened, a dangerous light entering his eyes. "You want to leave." It wasn't a question, but a statement of cold certainty. "No," she countered, surprising even herself with the clarity of her conviction. "I want to choose. I am not your possession, Roman. I am not a secret you hide away when it's convenient, or a weapon you deploy when it suits your purpose." Her voice rose, fueled by every suppressed fear, every chafed boundary. "I will not be a captive, gilded or otherwise. Not again." He remained silent, his gaze unblinking, his face a mask of unreadable control. She could feel his resistance, the automatic reassertion of his power, but she pushed through it. "I am willing to be with you," she continued, each word a deliberate, defiant step into the unknown. "But only as an equal partner, and that means absolute transparency. No more secrets about the risks I face. No more decisions made without my full knowledge and consent. If I'm in your world, Roman, I need to know everything, the good, the bad, and the deadly." She took a step closer, her hand reaching out, resting tentatively on his arm. "I faced down Bell because I understood the stakes. I need to understand them always. I need to be present." Roman's gaze dropped to her hand, then slowly back to her eyes. She saw the internal battle raging within him, the clash between his ingrained need for control and the undeniable strength she had just displayed. He saw her, truly saw her, not as a fragile civilian to be protected, but as a formidable force in her own right. The woman who had, against all odds, commanded a fixer with a gun, who had dismantled an alderman's empire with her intellect. A slow breath escaped him, almost a sigh. The tension in his broad shoulders eased, just a fraction. He reached out, his hand covering hers, his thumb stroking her skin with a surprising gentleness. "You are not like anyone I have ever met, Elena Morrison," he murmured, his voice low, a raw admission. The words were not a surrender but an acknowledgement, a profound acceptance. An equal partner, transparency, no more secrets about the risks. He repeated her terms, letting them settle between them, testing their weight. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, devoid of his usual predatory edge. "I can adapt." His acceptance was a revelation, a quiet earthquake that shifted the very ground beneath her feet. He was willing to change, for her. The fear was still there, the knowledge of his dangerous world a constant hum, but now it was mingled with a fierce, terrifying hope. She had made her choice, and he had, against all expectations, accepted it. Months later, the familiar scent of old paper and quiet ambition once again enveloped Elena. The Chicago Museum archives, her sanctuary, felt different now. Not just a place of work, but a testament to resilience. She moved with a renewed purpose, her fingers still calloused, tracing the delicate edges of ancient maps, her silver museum key a warm weight against her skin. The past trauma, the suffocating fear, had receded, replaced by a quiet confidence, a strength forged in the heart of the storm. She was still Elena, the principled archivist, but now she was also something more. The news arrived in an official, understated email. An anonymous, substantial donation had been made to the museum, earmarked specifically for a new restitution wing dedicated to the very project she championed. Elena read the words, her breath catching in her throat. Her mind immediately flashed to Roman. There was no name, no return address, but she knew. It was his discreet touch, his silent hand moving behind the scenes, using his vast, dangerous power for good. A peculiar, profound warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't an apology, but an acknowledgement. A quiet act of redemption, inspired by her work, by her unwavering fight for justice. She imagined him in his glass tower orchestrating this, a subtle shift in his own harsh code. Their relationship, born of fear and danger, had evolved into something complex, raw, and undeniably real. It wasn't a fairy tale, nor would it ever be, but it was theirs. They met on her terms now. No more gilded cages, no more monitored calls. Their conversations were frank, sometimes brutally so, about the risks, the shadows that would always cling to Roman's world. He shared the intel, the whispers of threats, the delicate balance of power he maintained. She listened, absorbed, asked questions, her eyes clear and unblinking. She was no longer a victim, but a participant, fully aware, fully present. One evening they stood together in his penthouse, the city lights a glittering expanse below them. The frost on the river below shimmered like scattered diamonds, a cold, beautiful ribbon against the dark urban sprawl. It was a familiar scene, yet everything felt fundamentally altered. He hadn't asked her to stay that night, but she had chosen to. His arm was around her, a comforting weight, no longer a restraint. She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body against hers, the steady beat of his heart. She reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his, a silent promise, a shared understanding that transcended words. "There will always be shadows, Elena," he murmured, his voice a low rumble, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "My world is built on them." She squeezed his hand. "I know," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "But now you share them, and I choose to face them with you." The secrets would always be there, woven into the fabric of his dangerous life. But now they were shared. She was aware of the risks, the ever-present danger that lurked just beneath the surface of their unconventional love. But there was also a profound connection, an unshakable bond forged in the crucible of chaos. She looked out at the city, at the endless possibilities and the hidden perils, and a cautious hope bloomed in her heart. They were navigating a new dawn, together, embracing the beautiful, terrifying uncertainty of their shared future. If you enjoyed the video, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel to keep up with our content.